there's a lot of tackle boxes that don't change, all right? So the sizes, 1/4 ounce, 3/8. The 3/8 is gonna be their new hammer trap. 1/2 ounce is probably the most popular. That's what probably 90% of my baits are, whether it's the chrome box or the red box. And they do make a 3/4 and a 1 ounce, but you know, even with the 3/4, I can probably count on my fingers and toes the numbers of times I've weighed in a bass on a 3/4 or a 1 ounce. It just really don't apply a lot of times. I know people up in Oklahoma that take a 1 ounce and bomb it out there deep and crawl it on the bottom. Me, I just haven't experienced that. Most of my trap fishing is gonna be in about 7 foot or less. And really it's really about 3 foot to 7 foot. I'm not really gonna do it much shallower than that. Because why? Because these lakes around here, if you're normal, if everything's normal, if you get shallower than 2 foot, there's too much grass. It's just not really clean enough, right? So 1/2 ounce is really the king. That's probably what I'm gonna throw most of the time. So moving on here, retrieves, we'll just throw it out and reel it in, right? Yes, but no. Throwing a bait out and reeling it in, if it's a trap, I mean, that's always a good way to cover water and to just kind of be consistent and exploring an area, looking for the fish. But once you located the fish, that's sometimes when you really have to get creative to figure out what's really there, okay? And hey, you know, some of y'all are gifted enough to use your forward-facing sonar to see how many fish are there, even if you are shallow. But by reeling the bait through there and catching a few, that's what you're really gonna know as far as size-wise, okay? And so once I've gotten a bite or two in an area by just throwing it out and reeling it in, then I may try some stop and go retrieves. I told my 2 sons about a month ago at a lake back home, there was a school of fish offshore that was only in about 7 foot. My sons are young, they're still using spinning rods, and they could just bomb that hammer trap out there and let it go to the bottom and just reel it and stop, reel it and stop. And that helped keep that bait down to where those fish were, right? And they both caught really nice fish all on their own and netted them, and it was a special moment. But you know, obviously if you throw a bait out and reel it in, it's not really gonna get down much. But sometimes if you want the bait to get down, that's when you're gonna delay that retrieve or change that retrieve, right? What I mean by delay the retrieve is you bomb it out there, maybe just click your reel, but don't start winding it just yet, okay? Maybe it's like this. Maybe you bomb it out there and just stick your rod tip in the water and tighten your line up. That fluorocarbon's kind of getting down there a little bit. It's gonna help keep that bait down. So while throwing it out, reeling it in is basically in a nutshell how you catch them. A stop and go retrieve or even a sweeping type retrieve can work good as well. If I'm throwing out there toward the parking lot and I think that the fish are hanging out about halfway back to the boat, when I'm winding it, I'm using visualization to think about where that bait's at in the water and what it's doing. Can kind of do that with forward facing these days, okay? But when that bait gets to where I think most of those fish are, I may just take my rod and stop reeling and just do this, and then catch up my slack. Okay, it's just a big sweep, catch up the slack. So I can't tell you why that works, but I know it does. It's something to do with that bait going steady, and then all of a sudden it might pause for a second and make that big sweep. It's gonna rattle a little bit tighter. It's gonna maybe travel a little bit faster for a second. That triggers that fish, he's on it. And when that rod gets right here and you pick up that slack, he's on there, okay? I don't know why, I don't know, I can't explain it, but that's a little technique that works sometimes Very rarely will I use that retrieve when I'm just searching around. Normally if I'm just looking for fish, I'm just throwing it out and reeling it in, okay? But once I have an area, and if it's Saturday morning and there's a lot of people around and it's getting really pressured, sometimes changing up that retrieve can trigger a few more fish here and there, okay? So as we move on here, you think about, well, your line. Does your line really matter? Yeah, it does, and here's why. So years ago, growing up on Caddo, fishing all them pad stems and dead grass in the wintertime, me and Randy Deaver, my tournament partner at the time, we were throwing our traps on 30-pound braid, okay, and we were catching them. I liked the way the braid felt when I was winding the bait. I could tell if it had one little piece of grass on it or if the bait was clear. But on Caddo, it didn't really matter. And I was, in my 20s and wasn't fishing nowhere else. But as I wanted to expand my horizons and get outside of Caddo Parish, I realized that fish at different lakes react differently to different lines. And so I got to this thing where I'm struggling in my head. I'm like, man, will fish at Rayburn bite braid? Maybe, maybe not. But I know that they're going to bite fluorocarbon, okay? If they're going to bite anything, it's going to be fluorocarbon, right? Some lakes you might could say, well, hey, I'm going to have one spooled up with braid and try it. But when I'm traveling around the country and I don't have a ton of time on the Chowan River, don't have any time on it, or if I'm fishing a new lake in Florida, man, I don't know about that braid, but I feel confident that I don't have anything to lose by going to fluoro right off the bat, okay? Braid has a lot of benefits. I mean, you can throw it further, you can feel what your bait's doing, because if you got one little piece of black fuzz or one little piece of hydrilla on that back hook or the front hook, sometimes you won't get bit, okay? So braid helps you feel all that, but at the end of the day, I don't want to throw it because I'm afraid of missing out on bites, okay? So I'm willing to have a little bit more higher of a maintenance line, meaning that, well, the fluorocarbon, man, I've got to yank it a little bit harder out of the grass. And man, I'd like to throw straight into this north wind, but maybe I can't throw it as far with the fluoro. But I'm willing to deal with some of that because I'm worried about what's going to happen under the water when that bait travels by some fish or a fish, right? So fluorocarbon, 16, 18 pound fluoro is what I'm throwing 99% of the time